Blog Talk Radio.
Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. The most talked about show on Tuesdays is the one coming out of Cleveland, Ohio. Forget about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Keep the Browns, Cavaliers to the sidestep, and we're trying to figure out if we should flip-flop the Guardians and Indians, but that's a story for another day. It's the American Sports History Podcast, hosted by my brother, a mentor, a friend to me, Peter Ray. Yours truly, Mark Mancini, producing it in Los Angeles, where temperatures has hit 110 degrees for 6 straight days. I don't know if clothes are going to be an option allowed here pretty soon if this thing keeps going on, but thank God for a tan. 347-205-9631. You can catch the archive version on blogtalkradio.com/Mancini Sports Podcast platforms, wherever you subscribe to podcasts, powered now by Mancini Media. So as I lay that red carpet down, put the podium in its place, hand off the mic, it's more him, less than me. First of all, Peter, how are you? Second of all, how can people get a hold of you? Third of all, I hope you had a great Labor Day, and this guest coming through has shook up 2 shows already in Fresno and Oakland. She's about ready to shake this one down in Cleveland, Ohio, and I don't mean Shaker Heights.
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well. I have a YouTube channel. It's my name. The name is my name, Peter J. Rea. We make history videos. You're absolutely right. Tonight's guest is in the World Martial Arts Hall of Fame, based on her abilities in Taekwondo, Kung Fu, and Wushu. And as a result of those skills, she's been working as a stunt person in movies and a Super Bowl commercial involving The Rock and WWE. She became a New York Giants fan in 1986 and has had podcasts regarding the New York Giants. Now, that would be the NFL team, not the baseball team that moved to San Francisco in 1958. However, the most impressive thing is she's become a very popular author. She was inspired by comic books, Lord of the Rings, Anne Rice vampire books, and the Wonder Woman character to produce a high fantasy. She's got 6 books already in the Birth of the Fae series, Locked Out of Heaven, Thine Eyes of Mercy, From the Ashes, Kingdom Come, and A Fae is Done, and the novella Fire, Ice, Acid, and Heart. We spoke on the telephone a few nights ago, and I was very impressed by her energy, intelligence, creativity, and strong spirit. Welcome to the show, Danielle Orsino.
Thank you so much for having me. How are you today?
Well, I'm well. Yeah, I might. I know this is a sports show, but I'm really intrigued by the books you have written. I've gone to I'd like to read a little bit from the Amazon page about your first book, about the author Danielle M. Orsino, destined to be a writer from a young age. Was working as a nurse, treating a patient who needed some distractions during long treatment sessions when inspiration struck. Orsino reached back to a forgotten skill, a childhood dream. From a young age, she had wanted to be a writer, so she decided to tell her patient a story. Little did she know a seed was planted that day, a seed that would grow into a fantastically epic adventure of heartbreak, hope, and rebirth, birth of the Fae, locked out of heaven. Drawing from her passion for comic books, cosplay, and the fantasy genre, along with her martial arts experience, Orsino brings forth an electric and hopeful book debut. She is taking on her biggest challenge to date, a story born from the long treatment sessions with a patient, and building it into a fantasy book series, Birth of the Fae. Expanding on her love of writing and comics and exploring the world of fantasy novels, she delves into the realm of fairies, retelling their origins from a completely new perspective. Now, a little bit about the book, this first book, Locked Out of Heaven. Ride on the backs of fire-breathing dragons with the dark fae and watch the light fae play in the shadows of primitive humanity as they build their magical world. Abandoned by their creator, 2 factions of powerful angels remain on Earth after the great war with Lucifer. They struggle to comprehend their creator's plan while their angel wings, a symbol of their angelic lineage, slowly and painfully decay. With no hope of returning to the shining kingdom, 2 groups of angels denounce their angelic lineage and develop into separate factions. The Court of Light, led by Queen Aurora, a former virtue angel, and the Court of Dark, ruled by King Sarevok, a former Power Brigade angel. The two monarchs have opposing views on how to govern their kin, but the one belief they agree on is that human worship equals power. Birth of the Fae, Locked Out of Heaven, is an epic fantasy adventure of heartbreak, rebirth, and hope that examines the bonds of family, friendship, and love. It is a fantastic tale of good versus evil in a beautiful world where the light fae and their potent elemental magic are tested by the raw power of the dragon-riding dark fae warriors. They are their own beings and masters of their own destiny. They are the fae. Danielle, can you tell us the story of your life?
Oh, wow. Okay, we can jump right into it. That's not too deep of a question at all, Peter. Let's just get right into the life story, right?
Right.
Why not? Where would you like to start with that? Would you like to start back at martial arts, or should we go right into the IV room? I'm going to let you lead.
You can go back to this is your chance to tell your story of your life, going back to your childhood and up to the present, or from your earliest memory, whatever you want to tell us.
Well, I started out like every girl or every person who had the joy of seeing Linda Carter twirl on TV, and Wonder Woman was a huge influence. So I was in that age group where, TV was nothing but Adam West, Linda Carter, and Bruce Lee. So I was kind of enamored with anything superhero. That was my life. I made tinfoil bracelets, and I had a headband and, my red rain boots. And my dad would sit there with tinfoil and make it bullets, and he would throw it at me, and I would deflect it. He said I was the easiest kid to babysit because all he had to do was sit there and throw things at me, and I would just, block them with my bracelets. Little did I know he was my Mr. Miyagi and already training me for martial arts.
Okay.
So I spent most of my time playing Wonder Woman and, Batman and Robin and the Green Hornet and Kato. And when I first saw the Green Hornet, my love for Batman and Robin left because I saw Kato, and I thought, he's really cool. Like, he drives the car. Kato never got captured. Like, Robin was always getting captured. I didn't want to be Robin anymore after I saw Kato because Kato didn't need a utility belt. He got to drive the car, and he was kicking butt. So I went from Batman and Robin to the Green Hornet. I saw Kato, and it was like, what is that? Who is that? I want to be him. And then Wonder Woman graced my screen, and everybody faded away because Linda Carter's the greatest thing ever in my eyes. So I was playing, superheroes for my childhood into adolescence most of the time because I discovered comic books, and then that's all I was reading. I'd like to tell you I was reading, Johnny Tremaine and A Tale of Two Cities, but no, I was reading Chris Claremont and the X-Men, the Justice League, and anything Jim Steranko drew. I was reading, was getting my hands on that, and just comic books in general, and that was pretty much, shaping my childhood.
Okay. And then what happened?
I realized that, once I realized the schools did not consider graphic novels book reports. That was the first thing I realized. They did not care about that. And I had to actually start reading a little bit more. So I read like The Secret of Nim and, other books. I loved reading, but I wanted to read what I wanted to read, which was, the Dark Phoenix saga and things like that. Schools and take my suggestions. But eventually, as I was doing all of this, I had one teacher in particular who realized that I was not slow. I was having trouble in math. He realized, he was my science teacher, that I was quite adept at a lot of things and adept at things, but math was not one of them. And so he introduced me to the wonderful world of the NFL. More importantly, the New York Giants, because they were in their 86 run. And he started teaching me stats. And he figured out a way, because my math teacher at the time did not want to be bothered with me, Mr. Sterling. He could have cared less. And Mr. Willman was my science teacher. He said, let me have a go at her. He's like, I think there's more to this kid. So he would teach me a stat every week. He would send me home with an assignment. He would be like, all right, Danielle, you're going to go home, and you are going to count up how many times Bill Sims throws the football. He's like, just count up how many times he throws it and how many times it is not caught, and bring me back those numbers. So I would actually, that would be my job. My homework assignment would be go home and just count it up. So I would sit there and count up how many times the ball was dropped or how many times, it was an incomplete pass, whatever it was. And I would bring these numbers to him, and he would show me, we're going to figure out percentages. And that's how he started teaching me math. He was like, you just need to be taught in a different way. He's like, you're not lazy. It's not that you're dumb. He's like, you just have to be taught differently. And that's how I started learning the game of football, was by this teacher just teaching me in a different way. And so I learned the game of football that way. I learned to have some confidence in myself as a girl in math, because when I was growing up, it was kind of like, math is for guys, girls do home ec, just the typical kind of misogynistic point of view. And he took his time, and by the time the Giants went to the Super Bowl, I could actually do stats. And I wound up going into high school and doing stats for my team, my high school team and things like that. And I carried that with me up through nursing school. So when it was time for me to do dosage calculations, I went right back to what I knew, which was, I'm going to sit and watch Eli and his interceptions, his little problem with interceptions. I went back and really kind of honed my math skills all over again by watching the New York Giants. So I have a certain love for the New York Giants that many people might be like, oh, I love my team. I'm like, no, I really love my team because they gave me confidence in learning. And I think that's, it's kind of cool to have that bond.
And so when growing up, you got into reading, and then got into the Giants, but then you really developed when you got into martial arts. What age did you get into that?
I got into martial arts at about 18. I decided I wanted to go to New Orleans with my girlfriend Jen, and I never went on spring break, nothing like that. And so I went to my father and I said, I want to go to New Orleans because I've been reading Anne Rice books. And, we wanted to do the whole tour of the Garden District and things like that in New Orleans. And so I asked my dad, can I go? And he was like, let me think. I'm going to send my 18-year-old daughter alone on a trip with her girlfriend that she's known since 6th grade. He's like, yeah. He's like, okay, I'll make you a deal. He's like, you can go, but he's like, you have to get your first belt in martial arts. And he knew the gym I worked at, or that I worked out at, there was a Taekwondo program. And he knew the instructor because my brother had taken it. My little brother had taken, a couple classes. So he knew the guy, Mr. McLaughlin. And he's like, yeah, you can go. You've got to get into Taekwondo. Thinking there's no way this kid's ever going to last. So I was like, all right, deal. And we shook on it. It was like, hardcore. And I said, okay. And he's like, you get a yellow belt, and I will let you go to New Orleans with Jen. And I'm like, great. How hard could that be? It's a big deal. I'm like, all right, a yellow belt, whatever. Because I'm thinking you walk in, you automatically get a white belt. So how hard could a yellow belt be? And I told my friend Jen, I said, okay, so my dad said. So Jen was like, great, let's go. And they rented out a little multi-purpose aerobics room in Gold's Gym in Danbury, Connecticut. And the man had been there for years. And I walked in and made every mistake you could possibly make in a martial arts school. I walked in wearing sweatpants slung to my hips, chewing gum, with a half shirt, full makeup on. Walked in front of the black belts like it was nothing, and then stood next to them, next to the highest rank, who I believe was Mr. Carbone, and at the time, I think he was a second-degree black belt, and stood to his right, which is a big no-no in martial arts. And I crossed in front of him. I didn't even go behind him. I walked right in front of him. Once again, in martial arts, this is like blasphemy. Chewing gum. And just walked in, hand on my hip, And Mr. McLaughlin walked in, and he's just staring at me, and he's like, and you are? I'm like, yeah, I'm here to, learn karate. I didn't even call it the right thing. And he was like, he's like, you and he just laughed at me. He was like, I'm sorry, you're here for what? I was like, yeah, whatever. And he's like, this is Taekwondo. And I was like, yeah, okay, and I just shrugged my shoulders at him. I was like, look, I just want to go to New Orleans with my friends, so I need to get a yellow belt, whatever. And just staring at him dude, give me the belt, do it. And he was like, okay, you have to go stand down there. And he pointed to the end, to the left. And I think there were 2 kids at the time. And when I mean kids, like maybe they were 10 years old. And they had blue belts, so they were intermediate to advanced. And I looked down there and I went, yeah, those are where the kids are. I'm an adult. And once again, still chewing gum, hand on my hip, like who the heck I thought I was. And he was like, I'm sorry, what's your name? And I was like, Danielle. And he's like, come here. And he just pulled me out of line. And he was like, and he looked me up and down. And he's like, okay. He's like, can you do a push-up? And I remember Jen had already walked out. She was already done with the whole thing. Like, she left me high and dry. And I was like, yeah. And I looked at him and I went, yeah, and I do real ones, not those girly ones on my knee. And I just remember that man looking at me and he went, oh, good. And it was a hardwood floor. And he's like, why don't you show me? And I got down and I did a couple. And he's like, can you do it on your knuckles? And I'm like, yeah, whatever. And I did one. And he went, great, hold it. And I'm like, hold it? And he's like, yeah, just hold it. Just see if you can hold one. And I was in the up position, held it, and he just walked away. And I'm like, where are you going? He's like, I'm going to go start class. Hold it. And he walked away, and I held the push-up, and I was staring at him, like, not understanding. Then I heard him start class, like, yelling. And that was my first kind of hint that, ooh, something's going on here. Like, he's serious. And then my arms started shaking, and I could feel my back starting to sway and, like, bend. And I'm starting to sweat, and he came over to me. And as I started to fall, he was like, yeah, I wouldn't do that, or else I start the clock all over. And I'm like, oh, and I straightened back out, and he came over to me, and he's like, okay, are we done with this attitude? And I just looked at him, I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, yes. And he's like, stand up. And I remember standing up. He's like, go get a shirt. He's like, one that actually covers you. He's like, wipe the makeup off your face. He's like, and get back here if you're ready to learn. He's like, because you'll either be the death of me or my greatest accomplishment. He's like, and I don't know yet. He's like, but one of us could leave here in a body bag, and I guarantee it's not me. And I just remember going, yes, sense. And he's like, no, not sensei. He's like, it's sabarim. This is a Korean art. And I was like, okay. And he let me go thinking I wouldn't come back. And I walked back in 5 minutes later with a full shirt on. I went upstairs. I bought a shirt, came back down. And he looked at me. He's like, oh, you came back. Like, he was shocked I was back. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, all right, you ready to learn something? And I'm like, yeah, I think I am. And I paid the first month, and I didn't pay again for 10 years. And that was it. And I was with him for, about 10 years. And that was the start of my career.
And you developed these, and now we're running, this is a half-hour show. We have 12 minutes. Do you want to give us, tell us about your martial arts career?
In a nutshell, I competed all up and down the East Coast in Taekwondo, which is a hard style. And then what I did was I made the jump to a soft style, which is Kung Fu Wushu. So that's your Chinese style. Think of it more acrobatics and what you see on, in the movies. The jumping around, all of it. I decided to make that jump just to see if I could. I just wanted to challenge myself. I went from this hard linear style, the forms are an H pattern or an I pattern, to this circular pattern. And I did that for the U.S. team. I competed. I tried out for the WKA U.S. team in soft style, and I went to Walt Disney World and competed for the World Championships there and took second place, the silver medal, in 2008 and won. And I was, that was kind of the icing on the cake because I had done hard style for so long. I just wanted to see if I could make the jump. I fought point sparring for years. My instructor, when I first started, Mr. McLaughlin, had said, you'll never just be a form girl. You have to be able to back it up. So I always fought as well. And I did both and competed for years on the circuit and was inducted into the World Martial Art Hall of Fame in 1999. And then into Ed Brown's Pioneers and Legends Hall of Fame in 2000 as a Competitor of the Year. So it's taken me everywhere, and I've had a great time.
And then you transitioned into stunt work?
I did some stunt work with Sifu Vincent Lin. He's the one who kind of started moving me in that direction. And I had, a wonderful time. That's where I met The Rock, and I did work for, it was the WWF. They were just transferring over into the WWE and making that transition. We did the Super Bowl commercial together. I worked with Mankind, The Undertaker, Chyna, Triple H, a bunch of wrestlers in that commercial. That was their first Super Bowl commercial ever. And I had a ball on the whole thing. That was my first real jump into it. And it was great. And, Vincent still is. He's just a great guy. He's a true artist and pianist. He's a martial artist. He's a gentleman. He does a lot of charity work. Vincent's just phenomenal. He's a great, great man. And he had a lot to do with just transferring me from hard style to a soft style and just teaching me about the business and things like that. But it's been lovely.
And then you, to make a living, you got into healthcare, but you've become this popular high fantasy author with these five books or six books, Birth of the Fae. Incredible. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I went into healthcare and thought that's where I was going to kind of stay and make my living and do all this. And the universe just had another plan for me. I met this patient who needed a distraction. I told him a story just to keep him in his chair, and he encouraged me to write it down. And I did. And that's where Birth of the Fae came from. It's just one of those things that, kind of shows that comic books influenced me a lot more than I ever thought they did. And I just kind of built that world. And then I met my publisher, Four Horsemen Publications, and they really encouraged me to keep writing and keep doing it. And they've been a wonderful mentor. And they then put me on the cover. Surprisingly, they saw my cosplay, where I dressed up as my characters from the book, Fae characters, this high fantasy, and they decided that they were going to throw me on the cover. So I'm actually on every cover of the book, except for the novella. That's a dragon. That's not me. But all the rest of them, that is me. So from the blonde mermaid all the way to the captain of the Royal Guards, that's all me. And it's been a lot of fun. And the giants even leak into that. My Fae bleed blue blood, and that's all because of my love for the giants. I bleed blue, and even my Fae do now. So it's all kind of it all comes back to football.
Now, you've written 6 books in this series, Birth of the Fae, and how many do you think you'll end up writing in this series?
I have one more in Volume 1, which I'm turning in the manuscript in January. It's pretty much finished, and that title is Forgive Us, and that's the end of Volume 1. But then I have for Volume 2, which takes place in modern day, I have 3 already complete. So I don't have a definite, I'm going to write 15 or I'm going to write 20. I don't have a limit just yet. I'm going to kind of see where it goes, where I'm still putting out good quality, and then kind of see where the characters are taking me. The patient who inspired all of this, his literary persona comes out in Volume 2. So I would like to keep that going, kind of as an homage to him. So his character, Agent Graham, makes his debut in Volume 2. And like I said, I'd like to kind of keep going with it as long as I can. I promised I wouldn't kill him off. He's the only one I promised I would never kill off, and my dragons. So we'll see how far it goes. But the plan is to keep writing until I'm not having any fun anymore. Once that happens and I feel the quality goes down, then of course I would stop. But right now, I just want to keep going with it.
So as you've been writing these books, does the story just come to you as you're writing, and then your imagination is just the story? How does that work, where you're able to create the story? Does it just sort of appear in your imagination, and you just write, and then more comes?
I like it. It just kind of evolves. I don't really set out. I'm not somebody who sits there and outlines the story like, this is going to happen, then this is going to happen. These characters just take on a life of their own. I kind of joke that they let me know how it's going to go. I had a character, her name is Indiga, and she's six or 7 years old, and she literally just popped into my head, with this theme song, Cherry Bomb, behind her, like at 3 a.m, and she was like, oh, get up, go write my story. And I had never planned for her, and she showed up just one night, and my brain kind of knocking on it, going, oh, it's my turn. Like, here I am. And I was like, okay, who are you? What are you doing here? I never planned on you. So these characters, I'm just their keeper, their guardian, and I just have to get their story out. But they just kind of pop in. I do have a soundtrack that I like to play. I just kind of pick songs that go with the emotional crescendo of the story, and that helps me get it all out. But no, their stories just pop up in my head. The character pops up, and then I just got to get it out on paper as quick as possible before they really start screaming in my head with all the voices. They let me know, hey, hurry up, get it done.
Well, it's amazing. What an incredible story. Now, I've got comments I need to get in here before we run out of time. Danny from Austin, Texas. Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. I've heard Danielle. She is amazing. Just don't like her New York Giants. Freddie from Marlborough, Massachusetts. Hi, Peter and Danielle. So amazed the guests that come on this show. This is the best in the network. Gail from Clearwater, Florida. This show that keeps going. Peter, you're amazing. This is part of my regime each and every week alongside Doc Talk on Saturdays with Dr. Greg Roscoe. Sal from Germantown, Pennsylvania. Hold tight, Danielle, the Eagles own you. Billy from Visalia, California. Don't need pepper spray, just bring Danielle. Now, Danielle, would you like to talk about your experience as a New York Giants fan since 1986?
I often say this when it comes to the Giants. I actually wrote this in volume 2 of my book. Being a Giants fan is flashes of greatness followed by stretches of mediocrity. That's what it's like to be a Giants fan, and I will bleed blue for them. I can say that as a Giants fan. No one else can, but I can say that. So this year, we will see what happens. I think we have the right regime in, praying and hoping on that one. And we will see Eagles. We will see Cowboys. And what we can all agree on is none of us like the Patriots. So, and we'll see what happens. But, I love being a Giants fan. Like I said, I bleed blue.
Yeah, this is American sports history. I'm really into sports history. And I was just talking today, a guy brought up Y.A. Tittle, the Giants quarterback about 60 years ago. Famous photograph of him in the end zones. He was sacked, his helmet was knocked off, and there was blood coming down his face. And, of course, back in the 70s when I was a kid, Frank Gifford was a mainstay of Monday Night Football, and I had no idea he was such a tremendous New York Giant in the 50s. So, to me, the Giants have a wonderful history. Are you interested in the history of the Giants before 1986?
Oh, yeah. Yep, I learned more as I went further on. And I always went back, and the Tittle picture reminds me of when Eli was sacked was hit in the preseason against the Jets, and he was bleeding. I thought there was a comparison with that a little bit too.
Oh, was it the Super Bowl where the Patriots were undefeated till the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl, and then Eli Manning threw the ball, the guy caught on top of his helmet, and then there was another play. I think it was really a tough throw, and the Giants pulled it out.
We always, like I said, flashes of greatness where you're like, wow, and then stretches of mediocrity where you're like, oh, that's it. I could say if I've lived through the Dave Brown era, I'm a Giants fan. That's how it is, and we always do what we got to do. But Eli to me is a ballot. He's a first-year ballot. I think he goes in. I know there's a lot of people that say otherwise, but I love me some Eli. I love the Eli and Peyton show too on ESPN on Monday nights. On ESPN 2. I do love it.
Well, and you said you started with the 86 Giants. 86, Cleveland had a big year. We were a contender with Bernie Kosar. Didn't get to the Super Bowl. And the Giants had Phil Simms, and he's on Sundays with the guys talking about games. So that's nice seeing him. And we had Mark Bavaro in Cleveland, I think, for at least a year.
Love
so that
Mark.
Was cool.
Love Bavaro. I love Navarro. I think he's the reason why you have a physical tight end. I think without him, you'd never have Gronk. I think he started that physical tight end prototype.
And the Giants had Larry Zonk, I believe, briefly at the end of his career, and Joe Pizarkic. I think they came up with was it this something? There was a rule change because of something that he did. I can't recall the specifics right now, but the time has flown by. Wow, what a wonderful show! Our guest has been Danielle Orsino, the author of Birth of the Fae series, high fantasy books. Amazing, and she's in the World Martial Arts Hall of Fame, has been involved in New York Giants podcasts. Danielle, do you have any final words tonight for our audience?
Thank you so much for having me, and if you guys want to keep up on all things Fae, please check me out at birthofthefae.com, or you can check me out at Bookie Call, a great app to find your next great book date. It's on iOS and on Apple and Android. And always check me out at fourhorsemenpublications.com. And thank you so much, Peter, for having me. I really appreciate it.
And what's the New York Giants podcast? Are you involved with the current one right now?
Not yet, but you know what? You never know. I might be coming up with my own sports show just to talk some more football. You know, it could be coming. We might want to keep our ears open for that.
Okay. Wow. I'm just in awe of what you've done and your energy. Like I said, your energy, intelligence, creativity, and strong spirit. And I wish you well with your these books. It's really what an inspiring life, and so interesting and tremendous. So wonderful. Next week we're going to have Bill North back on the show, former MLB player from the 1970s, and won a couple World Series. Dear listener, may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face and rains fall soft upon your fields. And until we meet again, may God hold you in the palm of his hand. Good night, everybody. Thanks again, Danielle Orsino.
Thank you.
Wonderful.